Welcome to Venture Step Podcast, where we discuss entrepreneurship, industry trends, and the occasional book review. For 3 years, we've lived in a world where OpenAI was the sun and everyone else was just in orbit. But recently, there's been a slight shift after Google's recent release of Google Pro 3.0 and some of the benchmarks that have come out. There was also a leaked memo from OpenAI from Sam Altman talking about rough vibes and economic headwinds. And so they're feeling it. And I think that this is one of the most interesting times to be a consumer and one of the interesting times to be talented and working at some of these companies, because you don't know what's going to happen next. Like, each company has got to push so hard to grab that next nugget. And I wonder what it is. I wonder what they're going to do. So some of the stuff that they did propose looked to be very risky. So I'm curious how it all plays out. Hopefully we don't die, but I am always interested in what's going to happen next. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about this OpenAI crisis. I don't want to say crisis, maybe a strong word, but just rough times, the rough times memo, the valuation disconnect, and some of their monetization issues. Then talking about Gemini 3.0, the enterprise gap between Anthropic, Google's Gemini offering versus OpenAI. And then that's pretty much it. But hey, you know me. I'm the host. I'm Dalton Anderson. Welcome to the show. I think we're getting into the mid 90s here. And it's so funny how in June I was super sick. And then after that, I went to a product on site for the company I work at. Then I got sick again, and I was sick for a month. And then I'm no longer sick, but then I broke my toe randomly. Like, I stubbed it on a brick outside, just walking around. And then after that, I was working out on Sunday, set aside my whole Sunday to work on some personal stuff, to create a list of potential guests I want on the show and reach out to them. And I was working out, doing some push-ups, some sit-ups, and before that, and some pull-ups. And before that, I did yoga for an hour just to work on my mobility and such. And then about 4 hours later, my back got super duper tight, and I was like, "Oh, that's not good." And then before you knew it, my back was locked up, and I physically couldn't record the episode yesterday. So I did 2 hours of stretching to help my back, these special back exercises. And then today I try to do the same thing. And then I also had to struggle getting on my clothes and taking off my clothes. I think I fell asleep with my socks on because I just had a hard time getting my socks off. I didn't mean it like that, but whatever. I guess people clip it. But yeah, so I couldn't take my socks off. And I also went and got a massage today. I bought some Tiger Balm and some ibuprofen, and that's doing wonders. Just one thing after another. I think this is hopefully the last thing. The last thing. I'm going to be very hopeful for the last thing, and the last thing for a while. And then I got a massage, and that was nice. That helps out. That helps out a lot. And it was funny because it took me 10 minutes to get my clothes back on because I'm still kind of wounded. My back is still a little tight, but it's really loosened up. The Tiger Balm, the massage, the ibuprofen. I am feeling a lot better. Without you think that's funny, I always got something on. I'm falling apart, but I'll be back. While I'm falling apart, somebody at the bottom is just putting together pieces, and it's just going to be this hardened, optimized structure. That's what I'm envisioning. Okay. So let's dive into the episode talking about the evaluation and the reality. So OpenAI, since they've been the sun, they've raised an insane amount of money at this crazy burn rate, and they are valued at 500 billion. They are projected to lose 8 billion in 2025. And just on compute and talent, they're spending $6.7 billion, which is a lot, right? Like, I don't know how else to put it. That's a lot of money for a company that has a hard time monetizing their user base. They're saying that monetizing around, or it's estimated to monetize around 4 to 10%, which is low, which is part of this conversation about economic headwinds and rough vibes ahead that Sam stated. And it's just a like a different vibe, like the user paying for OpenAI and then the user paying for Google. I feel that they're two different things, and there's a lot less there's a lot less tension, or not tension. Tension's not the right word. I'm looking for a special word. Drag? Maybe there's less drag in the Google landscape than there is in OpenAI, because OpenAI, when they integrate their product, they're integrating into some ecosystem, where Google has an ecosystem like 200, or not 200, 2 billion users are using search in Android every day. So right then and there, if you integrate with Google search in Chrome, and then you integrate with Androids, there you go. Boom. That gets you quite a bit of users. I mean, they're not going to use it every day, but it's there. It's an option. And so when you have an AI question, do I want to download an app, or do I just want to use the app that's pre-installed? Do I want to go in my settings and go through a whole bunch of hoops and change my assistant to OpenAI's, or do I just want to keep it the default? It Yeah, there's just so much less drag on the user, and it makes it easy. I mean, half the thing, half the value proposition of a company is how easy it is to do business. You could have the best product, but if it's a pain in the ass, no one's going to use it. And so I'm not saying OpenAI is a pain in the ass to use, but it's harder to use than others. So people have to go out of the way. And people were willing to go out of the way when their product was substantially better than everyone else on the market. Like Anthropic's always been great at coding, but very feels like the model is kind of drowning when you're speaking to it. It doesn't feel expressive like OpenAI or Google Gemini. And so the model just felt like it's dampened, everything is muted, and it doesn't have any color, or it's not very lively, is how I describe it, where OpenAI is and Gemini is. And you can kind of see that they're different user bases, where Anthropic is law and very sensitive about their model, and they're all about safety, and which is fine. It's just there's no wrong or right approach. It's just different routes. And so Anthropic's more enterprise space. OpenAI is more expressive, lively, and can be used either way. And then Gemini seems to be more enterprise vibes than consumer, but then they do have some products like Banana that went viral, and that was like a TikTok sensation. So it's kind of hit or miss with Google, like what they are. I think they're still figuring that out. But Anthropic is very solid. Hey, we're not going to win in the user base. We're going to be good at coding, and then we're going to have a very muted model that enterprises are going to feel comfortable with, and then we're going to specialize in law or something like that. And OpenAI is like, we're the sun. We're good at everything. We're the best. And then Anthropic is like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just be good at this stuff. And now Google is like, well, I want to be good at everything too. Let me play. I want to play. That's kind of where we're at. Where the memo came out a couple days after Google's release of Gemini Pro. They are monetizing a low amount of their user base. Their customer acquisition costs, like to get a premium user, is higher than a Google, because Google already has all these daily users, and they just got to throw something up in their ecosystem. But one thing that I think is very interesting to talk about the catch up is they're actually having diminishing returns on training. And so we're getting to the point where we're getting to the scaling wall, and we're at this point we're getting I say pretty close or very close to the point of maximum yield, to where you have already gotten all the increasing returns on optimizing the model. And now if you spend any more money on training or time on training or make it more complex, the actually it's not worth it. And the model becomes overtrained, or it just doesn't perform well, or it's a waste of money. Kind of all those things. I'm not sure exactly how they're measuring it, but when you're training a model, you can get to a certain point where you overtrain it and it actually gets worse. And it's just like, here's the optimal yield. Like, here's the curve. This is where we want to be. And so we're getting to that point where companies have trained, which is an insane amount, but they've trained all the data on the internet, and then they're running out of data, and so they're making their own data. And so that kind of puts into perspective how far they've taken things. And now they're getting to the point where, like, hey, well, it's actually not worth it to keep going, which I think is really cool. One, and then two, it makes things problematic for one, closed models, right? Like, if you're getting to the point of diminishing return, then there should be a catch up with companies like Meta, because Meta has good talent. They've got the infrastructure, they've got the chips. So they should get to the point to where they are at the point of, hey, we're getting diminishing returns here. And hopefully, if that open source model is close to what Google and Anthropic and OpenAI are producing, then why would you use a closed source model when you could use an open source model? Like, the first thing that you should look for is open source model, because the weights are open. But I would like to see how that plays out. But the next thing that I think is interesting about this whole topic about the diminishing returns is OpenAI was positioned and is positioned, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, as the sun, the best talent, the best models, the best everything, best ecosystem, all that stuff. And what happens when you do that is that's the expectation. The market expects you to be the best. And if you're not the best, then you're a loser. Whereas Anthropic has positioned themselves as, hey, we really like enterprise stuff, and we like law, and we like our safe model. So they're the safety guys. Anthropic is the safety people. OpenAI is the trailblazers, the big sun, the people with the gravitas. And then Google is the sleeping giant that has woken up. And so the positioning of Google is like, hey, we have the data, we have the infrastructure, we've got the chips. We were just being too conservative. We fell asleep at the wheel. We'll get this right in a couple of years. And Google has made things right. Their model is consistently very competitive compared to their peers. I mean, they had to go through Bard, and then they did the Gemini, Gemma, and Jim, and now they're at the point to where they're at Pro and Fast. And those models, like Fast, is per cost per compute is very, very good, and it is a very solid model for the cost to use the model for both Google and if you're using it via API as a developer. And then Pro is consistently like at the top of the benchmarks, first, second, sometimes third, but a lot of times it's first or second, and it's going head to head with OpenAI. But the problem with OpenAI is they don't have the same infrastructure as Google. It's not even close. So now we find ourselves in this place to where the market expectation for OpenAI was to be the best. And now that they have they potentially they've potentially removed the market confidence that they can execute on being the leader consistently. And so the footing that they sit on is shaky. And it never used to be. There's no one really challenging OpenAI like to the point to where they're questioning what do they need to do next? What's the next big push? And that's where things become very, very fun because it's a place to where things are unexpected and you get the best product. I always talk about like competition is so good. It's so good for customers. So if you're a consumer, it's awesome. And if you're into science, it's awesome because this is some sci-fi stuff. Like we're getting sci-fi stuff and it's all being pushed by capital and competition. But I mean the capital is just half the problem. Maybe a third of the problem. The talent and the drive is really the other thing. And then I've even mentioned X and they're pushing on their own. They're trying to go to Mars. And so their model is going to go into the Tesla Optimus, I think it's called, a little robot. So I just think it's very interesting, and how these models are positioned. Like Anthropic, as I said, is positioned as enterprise. OpenAI used to lead that space. They have decreased their market share by like 25%. Anthropic has surged to become the market leader. And so there is that thought process of like, hey, let's remove the wow factor. Let's just be consistent. And if you're going to have the wow factor to keep people on board, and there's other models and other companies that are servicing or potentially could service your client, and they don't even have to go to a different infrastructure. They could just add it as an add-on price within Google. It's just easier. It's just easier for everybody. And Anthropic used to be I didn't do a good segue to the next section, but we're talking about the cloud offerings, and Anthropic used to not be on Azure, and Azure used to only have OpenAI models. Now it's adding Anthropic's Claude because Microsoft is hedging. So OpenAI has lost their exclusivity. Claude is now the only model on AWS. And so there's just things that are they're small things, but they're slowly stacking up on OpenAI. And then there's just massive talent war between all these companies paying insane checks. The whole thing that Meta had going to build their super AI lab. All that stuff combined with other companies creating pretty good models with less drag on the user to have easeability being top of mind, it makes it a very tough environment. And unfortunately, a lot of things OpenAI have problems with, they don't control. Like they don't have their own chips. They don't make their chips. They don't have a substantial infrastructure. They're renting chips from Google, the TPUs, and they have their own infrastructure, yes, but they don't have their own infrastructure to support themselves like all outright. And so they have that problem. They don't have their own ecosystem, right? Google integrating AI search into their search was a big problem for them because they're going to do their own little search. They are more of a integration than they are something built in. Like Google has all their stuff built in. Like it's already integrated with calendar, with emails, and all these things. And they're demoing and talking about this agentic. Like not only are you able to chat with this model, it can also handle things independently for you. And they've shown that, and it's been in the plans. But to do that, it's easier when you've got an ecosystem, because you've got your own stack, your control of the updates, your control of everything. If you try to do that when you're not in control of the tech, it's very difficult, because you have to account for all the little updates that company is going to create, and then you've got to make sure your model still works. And so it's overall super difficult if you don't have that. On top of, if you were going to be in many different ecosystems, you've got to integrate with all of them and maintain it. I still believe that they're going to pull something out, but it's definitely rough months ahead, as Sam said. And I'm not sure, unless they have some massive breakthrough, or they find a different approach, and maybe OpenAI takes the user approach. They just go mass users, and they continue to make contracts with the government to give everybody access to AI compute. Maybe that works. And then Anthropic takes the safe muted model approach for enterprises, and then Google takes the developer slash enterprise user base that's on Google and the people using Firebase and Google Cloud. Maybe that's how it plays out. But right now, there's not a clear line of sight on adding substantial amount of value for people to download other apps or change their settings, do all this other stuff that they were willing to do before, because the model was that much better. But when it's close, it's like, I don't really care. It's like, do you want a burger from this place or the other place? And you close your eyes and you eat the burger. It tastes the same. So if they're that close, it's more of a personality or a UI or other things. A lot of people aren't that picky about it. If you're listening to this episode, you probably are, because I'm sure you're opinionated, but a lot of people just don't care about that stuff. So they care about being easy. And it doesn't seem like they're on track for that. But thank you for listening to the episode. Appreciate you. My back was still a little hurty. Hurt a little bit, but appreciate you wherever you are in this world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Toodaloo. See you next week.